On this date, September 20th, 40 years ago, one of the most important heavy rock albums of all time was released. Let's talk about it. Hi, and welcome back to Classic Guitar Rock. I'm Jeremy. Take just a minute and subscribe. I want to talk about one of the key hard rock, heavy metal albums ever recorded. Of course, we're talking about 1980's Blizzard of Ozz, the first Ozzy Osbourne album. And 1980, I think, and we'll do a whole nother video on this, 1980, I think, is the best year of hard rock and heavy metal. There are so many important albums that came out that year. And I'm going to say right now, I think the most important album of that year is this album, Blizzard of Ozz. And, you know, we're probably all familiar with the story. Ozzy was washed up, had been fired from Black Sabbath. We know how he found Randy Rhoads and all of this. I think we're all familiar with that. So I won't go into a whole lot of that. But I do want to talk about a few interesting things from this album. And sadly, coincidentally, just a few days ago, Lee Kerslake passed away, and Lee Kerslake plays a big part of this story on this album. But in 1980, it actually was released on September 20th, 1980 in the UK. Did not actually come out in the US until March of 1981. So there was a little delay there. But this was a huge album. Just a tremendous album. Of course, we always think of it as the launching pad for Randy Rhoads, as it was. But some other, big things happened. Number one, Bob Daisley. Bob Daisley had played in Widowmaker. He'd played in Rainbow. And it's been an ongoing argument, debate, since Blizzard about the contributions that Ozzy actually made. I think everyone knows that the vast majority of the material was written by Bob and Randy. Okay, Bob wrote the lyrics. Randy came up with most of the riffs and the music. And they do say that Ozzy contributed some melody things here and there. But, I think we all know that the vast majority of the music came from Bob and Randy. Lee Kerslake didn't really come into the picture until the end. And in fact, the only song on the album that he gets songwriting credit for is No Bone Movies, which was the last song they wrote. Most of it was already written, and they'd been rehearsing with other drummers. And as Bob Daisley says, Lee Kerslake was the final piece of the puzzle. Once they had him in the camp, they knew that they were ready to go. And they started, the very first song that they wrote for the album was actually Goodbye to Romance. And Goodbye to Romance was penned as I don't know if you call it tribute, requiem, whatever. Ozzy wrote it, the idea, and I don't know if that means he wrote the lyrics or if he and Bob just talked, but it was intended to be a goodbye to Black Sabbath, the band. And which was interesting. I didn't know that until I did a little research here. But that was the first song that they wrote, and apparently that was to be the first single. Can you imagine that being? I mean, it's a great song, but that to me seems like it would have been an odd choice to release a ballad, right, as your first single. And the record company decided, no, let's do something else. And then they wrote You Looking at Me, which never wound up on an album other than the B-side of the Mr. Crowley picture disc, I think. I had a copy of it. That was written, and that never became the lead-off single either. But just kind of some interesting little things that happened. One thing that's typical, I think, now that we know of Sharon, is that Sharon talks about how, the recording of Blizzard was one of the most wonderful times of my life, right? Well, she wasn't even there. Okay, so that's one problem with her saying that. She wasn't even there. Ozzy's first wife, Thelma, was still there, and there at Ridge Farm. where they recorded it. But it's interesting how over time Sharon has told this story differently. And it is interesting that Sharon was troubled with how much input Bob and Randy had in the album. You know, because from the very beginning, it sounds like she wanted it to be the Ozzy Osbourne band. And Randy and Bob and Lee were all under the impression that this band was Blizzard of Ozz, featuring Ozzy Osbourne. And so they all expected, you know, the band is Blizzard of Ozz, and then featuring Ozzy Osbourne would be in smaller letters. Well, as soon as they see the album come out, what do we see? Ozzy Osbourne, great big letters, Blizzard of Ozz. So, as in the name of the album is Blizzard of Ozz. And it is, right? That's what we refer to it. The first album is Blizzard of Ozz. But that was actually the name of the band. And then all of a sudden it became, in fact, at the first big show they did, I mean, they'd been touring around the UK, but when the band appeared at the Reading Festival in 1980, they were billed simply as Ozzy Osbourne's new band. So no mention of Blizzard of Ozz, anything like that. And so now what I've always heard from the Sharon camp is that Bob and Lee, and here's another interesting thing, guys. Blizzard and Diary were both in the can before Ozzy toured the US for Blizzard of Ozz. Okay, so they'd already recorded both albums. So that's why you see Bob and Lee are played on Diary of a Madman. If you look at the sleeve, you see the picture with Tommy Aldridge and Rudy Sarzo, but they did not play on that album. Okay, Rudy Sarzo and Tommy Aldridge have been associated with a couple huge albums that they never played on. Okay, like White Snake, 87. Rudy Sarzo never played on that album. Okay, Tommy Aldridge never played on that album, and yet all the videos for that huge White Snake album, we see both of them. So that's just kind of a little aside there. But Bob and Lee played on Blizzard, and they played on Diary. But then the story that you always hear from Sharon is that, oh, well, we had passport problems with Bob and Lee, and that's why we had to replace them. Okay, well, according to what Bob and Lee say, is they were fired because Sharon didn't want to give them credit and pay them. Okay, kind of a common theme that we hear. And Randy initially, according to Lee and Bob, he was going to quit. He was ready to leave, and they both said, no, you know, hey, we appreciate you worrying about us, but you don't mess this opportunity up for you. They want to keep you. You need to stay. And so he did stay. He brings in his friend, former bandmate Rudy Sarzo, and then they brought in Tommy, which is a great band too. Nothing against those two guys. They're awesome. But, you know, had things played a little differently, you know, that band, you know, could have been together for all of those US tours, and who knows what might have happened. But this album, guys, groundbreaking, you know, obviously for the guitar work. It was a shock, a good shock for everyone that thought Ozzy was done. You know, you listen to Never Say Die, it's a pretty uninspiring album. Not very good. Few good songs, but compared to Blizzard, it's crap, right? And so all of a sudden, this album comes out with Randy and with this band, and it was phenomenal. Just a great album. I have a special place for this. I was in 8th, 9th grade, somewhere around there when it came out, and was really getting into this album. This was my real introduction into what I call heavy music, you know, and just a great album. You know, think of the iconic songs: Crazy Train, I Don't Know, Mr. Crowley, Suicide Solution, Revelation, Mother Earth. I mean, these are just a huge album, such an inspiration to guitar players. You know, Randy Rhoads was such a talent. Really, a tragedy that we lost him. One of the truly despicable things that Sharon did was, again, it's all about royalties and copyright stuff, them not wanting to pay Bob and Lee, is in 19, no, sorry, in 2002. How's this? Think about this, guys. Bob and Lee won their case about getting, paid songwriting credits, right? Or being given songwriting credits. They won. They won their case. And so what does Sharon do? She goes in and remasters those two albums, replacing Bob and Lee's parts. Can you imagine that? Classic album. Can you imagine if someone got mad at Ringo and decided, let's go into Sgt. Pepper's and remove Ringo's drum parts and have someone else go in and play? Can you imagine that? That's disgusting. And yet that's what she did. And that was such a crappy, petty, dirtbag move that they eventually went back and restored it. But can you imagine doing that? You know, what if they had been upset with Randy? Would they have gone in and removed Randy and replaced his parts? Can you imagine that? That's just, you shake your head, and that's all you need to know about Sharon Osbourne right there. I mean, that tells you everything you need to know. Okay? But unbelievable. Anyways, this album, it was a huge album. I believe it's four-time platinum. Trying to look and find out here. I saw that in note here. But yeah, it is a four-time platinum album. And just really shook things up. It had a sound unlike any other album. No one played quite like Randy did. And then, of course, there were lots of copycats. I shouldn't call them copycats, but he had a big inspiration on a lot of the metal guitar work to follow. And just a phenomenal album. If you don't own this album, go out right now, today, and buy it. Because every hard rock fan should own this album. Simply for, we've got so little Randy Rhoads stuff, and he was such an impact to guitar playing, to music, that you really have to own Blizzard and Diary of a Madman. To be honest, I can do with or without the Ozzy stuff after that. That's just my opinion. Nothing against Jake, nothing against Zach. That's just not the same importance as Blizzard and Diary. But on this day, 40 years down the road, man, I'm going to give it a spin on vinyl and just listen really close to it. One other little thing that I wanted to bring up, the whole Suicide Solution thing. Now, I don't mean to get political. This is not about politics, but this was, again, one of those. Judas Priest faced the same thing where people try and sue musicians because someone did something terrible while they listen to their music. I mean, to me, that's just ridiculous. And the whole point of the song Suicide Solution is not promoting suicide. It's about alcohol. It's about the dangers of killing yourself with alcohol. That's why he called solution, a liquid, right? Suicide solution. He's calling alcohol a suicide solution. He's killing yourself. You know, you ask from the cask if there's life after birth. I mean, the whole message of this song is, and look what Ozzy had been through and maybe still going through. I don't know. Duh. It's about the dangers of the bottle. It's about killing yourself with alcohol. And so for them to say that this album was promoting suicide and suing him for it is ridiculous and just typical of our day and age, where people refuse to take responsibility for their own actions. But so Ozzy had the same thing happen to him that happened to Judas Priest, where someone tried to sue him for something that they had absolutely no fault in. Just ridiculous. Just wanted to throw that out. So guys, what do you think? What are your thoughts on this album? To me, again, I think it's the most important hard rock album of 1980. And there's some tremendous, I mean, that's the year of Permanent Waves and British Steel and there's several, Back in Black, but I still think Blizzard of Ozz is the most important hard rock album of 1980. And it was released on this day way back in 1980. Love to hear your thoughts. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time on Classic Guitar Rock. Bye-bye.